This video is brought to you by BTI Institute, a New Jersey leader in certification-based management training.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Agile discussion group. And tonight's topic is the evolution of the team. And to get started, let's do a real quick introduction of ourselves. I'm Bob. I'm basically a PMI New Jersey board member. I'm the director of Agile Learning. And as part of that, we try to, create learning opportunities for membership. And basically, we recently had a CSM CLB course last year, and we're in the process of scheduling more courses this year. And we also host this monthly Agile discussion group along with Nitin. And I recently joined the Federal Reserve, and for me to be able to do this, I need to say that what I'm about to share with you is my personal views and opinions, and anything I say do not reflect the views or opinions of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York or the Federal Reserve governors, as well as the PMI New Jersey board and PMI. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nitin.
Thanks, Bob. So like Bob, I am an Agile enthusiast. Many of you have heard us speak before. We both have a string of letters and acronyms after our name. We are learning all the time. I'm currently working as an Agile coach at an enterprise level with someone in healthcare. I have seen a multitude of teams, from people struggling to thriving, as well as those who've gone hyper-productive, who've produced a lot more. Engaged in several Agile adoptions in financial institutions and life sciences. And we like to say, hey, 2 palindromes, 1 philosophy, this works. So hope you enjoy the ride ahead. So let's get right to it. The evolution of teams. We have a few initial thoughts, and here are a few things we will touch upon during the slides. A lot of us have probably heard of Bruce Tuckman, who introduced the Tuckman model. And as you get a group of people together, you get into forming, storming, norming, performing. And eventually you get into adjourning, also known as mourning. So what do these mean? And again, some of this might resonate with people familiar with this model. In the beginning, when we're forming, people are a little unsure of the team's purpose. They need clarity. How might they fit in? Some people are curious. Some people are anxious. There are a range of emotions that people work through. Thereafter, we get into storming. Hey, let's just start working together. We've got a common purpose or goal, and there is potential and emerging conflict here. People are trying to understand boundaries. Thereafter, we get into norming. Now that there's been some potential friction, some conflict, we get a sense of each other's personalities, styles of working, the environment we're in. We start to resolve our differences and start producing something that's beneficial, which is getting into performing. Getting to your full potential, you go from this working group to really a team where people start to lean on each other as best as they can. And lastly, the adjourning or mourning stage. People eventually disband. Either the project has come to an end, we have a change in the organization, maybe teams are merging, and sometimes we don't realize that adjourning is more common than we think. Even with an existing group, when you introduce new people, sometimes that's a new group altogether, or when just one person leaves and moves on. So we see that quite often. Along with this, some of us might also be familiar with Dan Pink and his work on motivation. Traditionally, we have the carrots and sticks model, but interestingly, that doesn't work so well when it comes to software development or corporate IT. It was a model that used more for manufacturing. And Dan Pink talks a little bit about autonomy and mastery and purpose. And you want to have people empowered initially to say, hey, what is it that I can contribute towards? Can I contribute? Mastery is the skill sets and a lot more that they bring together. And purpose is really why am I doing why I'm doing? And it may not be necessarily rewarded with, let's say, a dollar amount or something as tangible. It's more of an emotional draw. And that's why where people volunteer, they give back, they play the guitar on the streets. So we are going to try to weave in some of these things in the slides ahead. What's next, Bob?
Okay, if you've been to any of in my training, you've probably seen this before, but this is like a great example, and it ties into exactly what Nitin just talked about with Dan Pink's intrinsic motivators, where you have purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And so pretty much this is a Scrum team, a typical Scrum team where you'd have a Scrum Master, developers, a product owner, and then outside of the team you have all these other forces pushing in, and one of them are Agile managers, and they're usually the people that the developers report to. And so what you have here is a team, and now the question is, everybody wants this high performing, super productive team. But how do you get there? You can't just wave a magical Agile wand and say, okay, everybody, you're now going to be a fully productive, self-organized team. So there's a lot of work that has to come into play. And that's where sometimes an organization might bring in Agile coaches, and they're also sitting outside the circle of Scrum. Because if you notice here, in this circle, there's only 3 roles, as you all know, that there's a product owner, Scrum Master, and a developer. Now, the question is, how do you get these developers to really act as a great team? And so just to kind of peel back the Agile manager a little bit. And in my experience over the years working with Agile teams, these are the people that are suddenly their job and their life changes. All of a sudden, they move, they're no longer actually the person that makes the commitments, and they're no longer the person that drives the team to get all the work done by telling people what to do. And so I'm not going to read these slides to you, but what in an Agile environment, what we want them to do is get out of the weeds and get more into the mastery, where basically they're the enablers. They're the ones that are encouraging their team members to grow. They're creating training opportunities. And so that's pretty much what we want them to do, and basically stop doing these things on the left. And so things on the right would include working and helping the product owner, Scrum Master, and basically always looking for ways to improve the team. Also understanding the team and their slack, and making sure that they're not working too much overtime, because again, it's not healthy. And if you look at the Agile principle, sustainable pace, it goes directly against that. And Agile managers also can help clear roadblocks, and they can help team members grow their skills, and basically also living with that Dan Pink thing that Nitin just described. It basically, it helps the team members grow mastery. And there's probably some more. Anybody have any other things that you see Agile managers doing? Just remember that you were muted before we started, and if you want to share, just please unmute yourself.
Or put it in the chat as well as we go along.
All right. I can't see my, what's showing on my screen, but this chart is in this book. It's called Leading Teams. It came out in the early 2000s by Richard Hackman, and it's a really great book. It's got a lot of information about teams and how they form, and this chart kind of sums it all up a little bit. And so let me explain a little bit. So pretty much on the bottom, you have 4 types of teams. You have a manager lead team, a self-managing team, and in Scrum, before the recent update to the Scrum Guide, we used to call this a self-organizing team, but now it's called a self-managing team. Then there's a self-designing team and a self-governing team. Now, typically when a team first gets started with Scrum, there used to be manager-led. That's pretty much, it's pretty straightforward. A manager basically makes a commitment, then basically tells the team what to do. And that's it. And the team members are measured on how well they're able to do what the manager told them to do. And if they do what the manager said, they don't get blamed. So it's a really safe environment, but it doesn't kind of live in that Dan Pink's world where Nitin was describing, as far as having autonomy, having a purpose, and having mastery. But some people like to live in this space. And so the next step up would be a self-managing team. And as you can see here, the management responsibility gets wider and wider, meaning they have less and less. And so basically now a self-managing team is a typical team that businesses dream about, where you have a product owner and the product owner says, hey team, I'd like to do these 10 things in the next sprint. And that's it. And they basically, the team will take a look at the 10 things and they'll figure it out among themselves. And they'll say, okay, I can do this, I can do that. And by the way, this person's going to be out, so we're not going to be able to do the other thing. So the team figures it out. They don't get involved with, the manager saying, okay, you do this task, you do this task. It's the whole team doing the work. And then from there, and this is the really cool spot, is when the team self-designs. And that's basically when a team is given a task and they'll come to you and say, I need this skill, this skill, this skill in order to complete this task. So they're actually designing it themselves. These types of teams also would interview their scrum master. They would interview other development team members before they come on. And so this goes into the self-designing. It gets away from the manager, interviewing people, saying, okay, this person goes on this team. These kind of teams pretty much say, hey, this is what we need to do. Let's get these people together and let's get it done. And then finally, you get to the ultimate with a self-governing team. And this is when you have a fully empowered product owner, where basically the product owner is given the responsibility within the organization and can make those calls and basically deliver business value. And pretty much that team with that product owner is self-sufficient and they're self-governing. Now, I'll give you an example of what happened to me and, in jobs going back in my career. I'm working with a team and we have a challenge. We're trying to figure out how to get something done. And the team is used to be manager led. All right. So basically I asked if you could have anybody, sort of like the football draft. All right. If we could draft anybody onto our team, who would it be for us to be able to deliver this? All right. So I thought this would be really cool. It would be a great chance for the team to say, well, if we had this person from over here and this person from over here and this person from this area, we'd be able to accomplish that goal. But guess what? It was dead silence. So basically, here I was thinking, my team was self-managing, but they were still kind of in the manager lead area. So it's an interesting phenomenon that you have to be watching out for. And this chart kind of really shows it all. So Nitin, do you have any comments about that?
No, this is a great representation, Bob. I do want to supplement by saying, what does self-organizing mean? When I interview Scrum Master, and we look for three things: the team norms, team agreements, and a conflict resolution model. And they all weave into this as well.
Any comments from the audience about this? Have you experienced of all this? I see somebody raise their hand.
Yeah, hi, this is Ankush. I actually had a question related to the previous slide. You talked about the roles. So, one of the roles of Scrum Master is to remove obstacles for the team, and it seems to overlap with what the Agile Manager does. So I guess my question is, how do they work together, and can Scrum Master also assume the role of an Agile Manager and vice versa?
You want me to take the first pass, Nitin?
Yeah, you can. Then I got some other thoughts. Go ahead.
Okay. The Scrum Master, a developer should never report to a Scrum Master. The Scrum Master should never be the person's manager. The slide that I showed about the Agile Manager it's often overlooked. If you were to read the Scrum Guide, you would see that the Scrum Master is the person that's responsible for removing blockers. I take a little bit of a different approach with that, where I tried to get the team to figure it out first. I then would, if the team can't do it, I would then take it to somebody like an Agile Manager. But so often an Agile Manager is overlooked because these people are really well connected because they've been in the business for a while, and they can usually resolve something in a matter of minutes when it could take a team or somebody that without that background a lot longer to actually resolve it. So did that answer your question? Because basically you don't want the developers reporting to the Scrum Master. And I've seen that in the past, and it creates a bad dynamic. So Nitin?
Thanks, Bob. So, a classic certification question that blew my mind was a yes no. A Scrum Master is in a position of management. And I said no, and that was wrong. I said, wait, what? And what Ken Schwaber, one of the co-developers of Scrum, was alluding to is saying the Scrum Master manages the process, not the people. So when it comes to a power dynamic or authority, even the Scrum Master has no authority of your traditional dev team. Now, a Scrum Master also is someone who cannot do it all. So should there be a need to escalate a few things outside of the core of the Scrum team, then you would look for other people. And if your organization has an Agile manager, might approach such a person for help and assistance.
Got it. Thank you. That helps in understanding it.
All right. Let's
Okay,
get back.
let's move ahead.
All right. And so what, you can leave this meeting with is this question. Think about your team. Where are they? Do they interview people before they join? Do they interview Scrum Masters? Do they wait to be told what to do? And, it gives you a really good idea as far as where your team is and how you get to that high performing team. Because if you're in this area being manager led, it's going to be really hard. You have to get them to nudge over and start taking ownership and taking risks, because it's much safer to be told by your manager what to do. All right, Nitin.
Right, so we just had a few possible team compositions. And as Bob was alluding to, if you have a manager-led type scenario or someone outside of the core team, such as a PMO practice, and you have a component-based team, typically led by a manager. And how are they measured? For the execution of the plan, and how are they managed? By the manager or PM or tech lead. Interestingly, Scrum says there are no leads or items of superiority in a dev team. They're just known as members of the dev team. Leave your ego out at the door. We are working together to accomplish a common goal, which is getting into your self-managing teams. And ideally, you want a feature team, so you're not really specialists. You are T-shaped personnel. So you might be down and deep with domain knowledge in one area, but if you imagine the letter T, you can extend your arms and tap someone on your left or your right and reach out for help. The facilitator in all this is the Scrum Master, and it takes a lot of skill to do this. And how are you measured? Just the outcome. What do you get out every 2 to 4 weeks, sprint after sprint, release after release? And as discussed, how do you manage yourself? An empowered, self-organizing team. And again, Scrum intentionally does not define this, but in the industry, a lot of people look for 3 components to what that means. Your norms, your agreements, and a potential conflict resolution model. So next slide, Bob. Dilbert. How could we not have Dilbert here with so So if we think of a few activities on the left, hey, who's going to do or give us insights on the utilization rates? And you might have someone in a position of authority or someone who's accustomed to answering that. Say, hey, spend X amount of time here, Y amount of time there. Whereas an empowered self-managing team can really understand how much they can take on. And no matter how many pages we put in a printer, it won't print any faster. They should be able to say, hey, I'm spread out pretty thin. This is what we think as a team we can take on in this area. The push or pull system, again, very common in self-managing teams. It's a pull system. You volunteer. You go out in a buffet, you fill up your plate, whatever you can take, you consume it. If you have capacity, you go back again, take it, you pick and choose what you can. Hey, you got room for dessert? Go ahead, grab it. A push system is more of a mother feeding her child. That's the initial thing. We all kind of go through that. But with software development teams, you want to try to get that pull system in place. At ownership, certainly Scrum is clear. The sprint backlog is collectively owned by members of the dev team. What's next, Bob?
I just wanted to add something to that first line here.
Sure.
I don't know if you've gotten into conversations, where everybody's always asking like, what's your utilization rate? And that might give you a clue that you're dealing with manager-led teams, because if it's a self-organizing team, they don't need to be told their utilization rate, because the team, when they're volunteering for work, if they have training scheduled for a week during the sprint, guess what? They're going to volunteer for less. We don't need to tell the person 20% of your time is going to be spent on training. So these are all clues that you can use in your toolbox. So that when you're looking at your team, to see where you actually are in the spectrum. Okay, Nitin.
So Agile frameworks like Scrum, again, Scrum is just one of the flavors under agility, work with the Agile values and principles, which we have talked about in the past, and we've got a nice visual. We'll just revisit it very quickly, and we'll look at them next.
And so pretty much, if you look at the image on the left, if you go to agilemanifesto.org, you'll see that the Agile values, which are the 4 right here in the middle. And we're not, again, we've talked about these a lot. And then if you were to click a link on this site, you'd be able to see the principles. And these are the 12 principles. And what we're going to do next is we're going to share with you how these align with a self-managing team versus a manager-led team. So Nitin.
Okay, we're just answering a question in chat. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And the principle says build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. What would that look like in a self-managing team? What's supported is a self-organizing model, collaboration, the removal of impediments, or help remove impediments, as Bob had said. You want to empower the team to do that first themselves, and then have it fall on someone like a Scrum Master. We're not talking about a status or reporting, and we can still be transparent and get a sense of where we are before we get to an inspect and adapt model. Now to contrast that, I'll keep going. Agile processes to promote sustained development.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just follow it across. The manager led. Yeah.
Right. So the manager led, the manager is actually taking on a lot of the burden, and it's just a traditional role. So we might want to think about how to unburden such a person so that the others take on more of this. So the next principle, agile processes promote sustainable development. Sponsors, developers, users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Volunteer for work, and understand capacity. There's no typo there. We intentionally put that in 3 times because, again, no matter how many pages you put in a printer, it will not print any faster. Reveal how much you can take on and let the team decide based on trends and past metrics what is a potential future. So again, the manager is burdened by commitments and the lack of ownership. We want to try to unburden this person. And lastly, here, the best architectures, requirements, and design emerge. Now, this can be threatening to some people and uncomfortable. They're used to the bare bones structures and the architecture before moving things ahead. But if you are truly agile and you're nimble, you can keep going and some of that will emerge. You'll get into MVP and other fancy terms like gold plating and what is of value and what do we do next. And again, manager-led team in contrast, the team is told what to do, and we want to try to unburden and shift the needle a little bit. So what's next, Bob?
Sure. So basically what we're giving you tonight is a toolbox where you can take a look at where your team is and you can have these conversations. And a great way to start is with the 12 principles that we're taking you through. And if the team says, well, I can't do that. So then you basically step back and say, well, what do we need to change for you to do that? And what ends up happening is you generate a really great conversation among your team members. And then you come up with action items that you can actually work on, so that if the team doesn't feel they're unable to work with these principles, you can figure out why they can't and then make changes to fix it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the principles that are aligned with the values to give you these clues. And so the next one is working software over comprehensive documentation. That's the Agile Manifesto value. And basically the principle is deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter timescale. So with a self-managing team, it basically, you get quick feedback, you figure out what's important, and if you're in a very competitive environment, you can respond fast and work fast. And I apologize that these builds are wrong. So basically on a manager-led team, it's basically it's not supported, because usually when a manager is leading a team, they have a project manager with a project plan saying, we must follow the plan, we must do this, we must do that. So the next one is working software as a primary measure of progress. And the principle supported, is this valuable? Can I use it? That's pretty much, is this something that delivers business value? With a manager-led team, it's not supported, because again, they're being forced to follow a plan. And so the next is continuous attention to technical excellence. And the principle supported is high quality and basically really great engineering practices like CI/CD, continuous integration, pair programming, coding standards. It's all the great things that make great software. And basically, if it's manager-led, it's not supported. Somebody else owns the quality. Team told how to do their work. So again, they're not taking ownership. And then the last principle that's aligned with this value, working software, is simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. And basically, the ideal thing is if you can write one line of code to solve the problem, that's the best solution. Simple is always better. With manager-led, the team's not allowed to do that. They're basically told what to do. So I'm hoping, and Nitin and I are hoping, that you're starting to see how you can use these principles to work with the team and see where they are. Are they a manager-led team? Are they self-managing? And there may be some things that the team doesn't feel empowered enough to do yet that can help them move, break that barrier between a manager lead and self-managing. So Nitin.
Thanks, Bob. So the next one, invalid customer collaboration over contract negotiation. What does the principle say? Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer and delight them as early as we can by getting them something tangible in their hands as quickly with great value. And what's supported in self-managing team, the quick feedback. The feedback loop is short and quick, and the instant gratification. In the manager-led team, it may not be as supportive. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. And to some people, they're baffled by this. And for me, I'm like, why? How come? Don't you want to have that face-to-face and talk and have the open channels of communication and look at things together? With a manager-led one, in contrast, if you are, again, burdening this one person, then there could be some things that lead to misinterpretations, or there could be some questions that linger on, or they might not be the collective wisdom and insight that a group of people bring in. Last one, the most effective and efficient way of talking or conveying information is face-to-face. Yes, we are virtual nowadays and with COVID and the pandemic, but the best thing is just to talk to each other face to face. As much as I love texting my wife, I think there's a different dynamic when I go up to her and talk. And yes, you don't want to have things lost in translation or interpretation, amongst other things. Bob, anything to add from your side?
That that pretty much covers it. And while we were doing this, basically, if you notice, this principle is supported with a manager-led team, because if you're, if I'm sure you've worked with manager-led teams in the past where you're always doing these status reporting meetings. So there's probably more meetings than you can imagine that result from that. So it's just an interesting thing. So if you want to say that the principal supportive, with manageable led teams, this would be the one, to face the whole idea of having face-to-face conversations. All right, so the next is respond to change over following a plan. And basically there's two principles here. And the first one is welcome change in requirements even later in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. And basically pretty self-explanatory. The team, basically the product owner is able to change what the team's doing at the next sprint. So basically if the feedback is bad, they can just totally change the direction, which is really powerful. However, when you're working in a manager-led team, you're following a very rigorous change control process. So pretty much if everybody sees that what you're building is not going to work, pretty much it's very difficult to change direction. And it's designed that way on purpose. And then the last principle is at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. And basically, it supports retrospectives. Like if you're following Scrum correctly, you'd be doing a retrospective after each sprint. So the team can look for ways to improve, and that aligns with Kaizen. And so with a manager-led team, usually you wait till the end of the project and do what they call a post-mortem. And then that all gets documented. And the problem is there's a lot of great learning, but the team doing the work, that last project didn't benefit from it. Maybe that post-mortem will benefit future projects, but it's not going to help the work that's currently being done. And again, this shows how the major difference between self-managing and manager-led. And so we wanted to basically come to the end, and hopefully, everybody in the audience will have some questions about, what you've just seen and whether or not it makes sense, or if you've seen something different that maybe Nitin and I haven't. So we'd like to open it up for questions now.
Yeah, Bob, there's a question in the chat from Jim. He had a comment he wanted to make. He said, isn't it greatly dependent on the personalities of the team members to determine how high they can go in governing themselves? Because there's lots of group dynamics involved. You have a comment on that?
I can take a stab at this. I agree. Anytime you get two people in, there's something called a third entity. And that's the dynamic, the interaction, and what emerges. As you grow into a triad or a quad or greater, there's something else that emerges. And what we need is that awareness, that not only the self-awareness at an individual level, but someone to go in, take a neutral stance, and reveal to people what it is meaning to be a part of this team. And certainly, yeah, with just the addition or removal of one person, just as an example, the dynamic changes. With the introduction of, let's say, a manager or a person of authority who might just visit on occasion, that is also sometimes bringing what's called the invisible gun effect. Imagine walking, everybody's having a good time, they're talking, the conversation is fluid, and maybe someone at a C level enters the room and the dynamic changes. People quiet down or wait, oh, there's someone here of authority or importance, and that person may not realize that that's what's happening, and they may not even intend to bring that on. Maybe they would have preferred just let the conversation go that they have that way and then take it on. So yeah, there are a lot of different ways of looking at this. Mm-hmm. Bob, any thoughts?
Sure. Another thing to look at, I really, like what you said, Nitin. You could also look at the team size. Uh, Sometimes you might be faced with a 12, 13, 14 member team. And what I find is it's a lot easier if you're dealing with a 5 to 7 or 8 people. To me, like an ideal size is around 6. As long as you have enough skills, like Nitin mentioned, those T-shaped skills, among the team members, that they can solve anything. Because the minute the team has to reach out to other teams, that's when things really slow down, because you're dealing with competing priorities. Like the other team that needs to help, they might have some other commitments and things like that. So that's another dynamic that you could look at. Like if you're seeing that you're having a hard time getting your team to gel, you could take. I always take the most simple approaches, like maybe we're too big, and then what you do, you don't be a manager-led team. You ask the team, all right, we're 14 people. How should we split up? It all leads to me to be successful in Agile and Scrum. It's all about the team, and it's how you enable the team so that they can actually deliver the functionality that the business needs without going through a lot of excessive communications and things like that. So did that answer the question for the person that asked it?
Well, we'll see if Jim types that response in the chat group. Bob Mayer actually had a related question. He says, how does one manage strengths and weaknesses of developers? Again, not all developers are created equal. So how do you manage that in terms of for a self-managed team?
So I responded to this, and I'm glad this was asked. I would say stop trying to manage this. Instead, take a slightly different stance and reveal the strengths. And a model I use as an agile coach is something called Strengths Finder. It's supported by over 2 decades of research by Dr. Clifton and now Tom Roth. We often look at our weaknesses and try to see how we can turn that around and improve upon it. They flipped the coin. They said, what about our strengths? Why are we forgetting those? And why not hone in on that? And when you use that philosophy, you can actually take a very quick 20-minute or so assessment. You get a revelation of who you are, a quick psychological profile. You can actually map it out to what it looks like in a team and see what the team's strengths are. And when you reveal this to people, you'll automatically see where the team may falter. As an example, I was with a financial institution. They were doing an agile adoption, and they had someone taking on a product owner role, someone emerging from their BA skill sets. And we said, hey, this person's got a lot of negotiation skills, they have charm, and it seems they were just really there for these things. And the other team members, while they could certainly do negotiations, it's not their forte, it's not their strength. Let's say that person won the lottery or just took leave for a sprint or 2 weeks, what would happen? You're just raising a question based on what you see. And the team themselves say, oh, we'd be in a pretty bad place, we better either find someone with those skills as we grow or figure out what to do. So I would say look for a model, and Strengths Finder is something I recommend, and try to introduce that in your teams. It'll be a common lingo as well, and it's on the positive side. So Bob, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I since I've been working with Nitin, I really became a fan of Strengths Finder, and I found that, like, I had an Audible subscription where I had all these Audible credits, and for like $12, so I had all these credits, and guess what I did around the holidays and Christmas time? I said, hey everybody, you're going to get Strengths Finder. So basically, they got the Audible book and they got access to the survey. The way to do, you can actually go to the Gallup website and actually, buy it for your team, but you can also get this survey if you buy the book. It comes as part of it. It's a great tool, and it really opened a lot of our team members' eyes when they saw, where the strengths were and where the gaps were, and then they went, oh, that's why we have a problem when that person's out. It's a really great tool.
Okay. Again, related to the other two questions too, Lance Tober actually has a question. And again, I encourage you all to ask your questions yourself, only because my repeating of your question may not be doing it justice. But Lance's question is that any suggestions on how to motivate team members that are set in their ways and just want to skate and just get by? So I guess despite all your efforts, they just kind of they just want to be manager led, and they don't want to be self-managing, let alone agile. What do you do about those folks?
It sounds like that person is working in reality because it's everything. If you look at one of the agile principles, it's to build products around motivated individuals. That motivated word is so key. Motivated people are the kind of people that you need on an agile team. If people don't have the motivation, what I would say is, maybe an agile team is not for you. It might sound a little strong and direct, but it takes people that have that desire to basically challenge themselves and learn new things and take risks to be on an agile team. And so, and I'm sure there's plenty of jobs for people that don't want to do that. And, that's pretty much my take on it. How about you, Nitin?
Sometimes when I'm driving on the highway and someone cuts me off, I go, yeah, okay, I'm not in a rush. Let the guy go. And then there are other days someone cuts me, I'm like, what are you doing? And I come up with some words of profanity in different languages as well. So I would say, assuming you're working with professionals in the workplace, I would ask, hey, who is this person bothering? Are they a pain to someone they're sitting next to? Are they possibly a pain to everybody on the team? Are they a pain to just a product owner? Are they a pain to someone outside of the team? What's going on? I would be a little curious and try to dwell. And one thing that helps is, again, if you have a neutral facilitator like a Scrum Master, I would do or facilitate an exercise to get into team norms and agreements, just to see what happens when the team is faced with conflict. I would ask questions like, how does this team want to celebrate? How does this team want to mourn? Because you know what? Projects come and go. You're usually stuck with the same group of people. And for some people, it might be insightful. It might just be a pain point just to you and not the others. So you have to just go a little deeper to figure this out. And usually when you get peers holding each other to a higher standard, that's better. That's better than just one person who takes on that burden. So I would ask you to take a slightly different stance and see if you can get other people involved as well in a different way.
I think that's a great answer. I think there was one more question here, and while I'm scrolling through the chat, but while I'm scrolling through the chat, if anybody wants to ask a question, just turn on your microphone and your camera, please ask it. No questions. There was one question. I'm looking for that. Oh, one person asked simply that when you showed all those various areas, the differences between an agile team, a self-managed team, and a manager-led team, basically Larry Salo said that that's really presented as a continuum, right, as opposed to just a checklist, because he says, or is it unless all of those self-managing principles and behaviors are in place, they are considered unless they're all in place, they're considered manager-led, or you can be, manager-led in some areas and self-managed in some areas. Any comments on that?
It's an evolution.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
it's
Bob.
not all or none, but you need to understand where you're trying to get to, and the what Nitin was saying about developing norms, and what do you do when people disagree? How do we handle that? It's all part of the evolution of a team. And you know, this is an old book that I was showing you, this Leading Teams book, but it's amazing. It's just so crisp. It's such a good book that it can help you, give you guidance, because basically it kind of goes through the evolution where there's like, when people first start working together, they're a working group. You know, basically they're not even a team yet. And then you go through that whole dynamic of moving from a working group to a team and things like that. And all that is really described well in that book.
There's another model, and this also alludes to another question in the chat. If you are using Scrum, there is a 4 grid, if you can imagine. There's something called a Scrum knot. So people might say, hey, we're doing Scrum, but we're not doing retrospectives, right? So you're kind of saying you're not really doing Scrum. Then you go like the Scrum buts. Hey, we're doing Scrum, but we on occasion do our daily Scrums. Well, okay, that's another dysfunction. It's called daily for a reason. Then you get into something higher and you evolving to a Scrum and. Hey, we're doing Scrum and we wrap up our daily Scrum in less than 15 minutes, which is great. That's the time box. It doesn't have to go up to 15. And if you knock it out sooner, why not? You know? So there's this evolution. And as Bob said, you kind of see where you're going and where this team wants to be going and heading, right? Now, Scrum is just one of the containers. You could have other teams, be it agile or non-agile, that are empowering people and can lean on each other and embody that. And that's fine too. I think you can have people who are considered managers or have that title or take that on. And they have this great sense of self-awareness and they're persons, and they are respected. Because like they say, you know, people don't really leave jobs or assignments because of the nature of the work always. It's sometimes a leadership style and what is there and what trickles out and what trickles down. So we got to keep some of those things in mind as we progress and evolve.
Anybody else have any questions for Bob and Nitin? I see that Alicia Osoria put a question out there, but again, I think it's related to something you've answered already, but let me read her question. She says, when you see a team can benefit from agile principles, but they are stuck in a waterfall approach, how can you obtain buy-in to help them consider an alternative? Alicia, I see you turned your camera on. You want to ask your question yourself? I'm not sure.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that, John. That was my question. If you see that they're kind of stuck in the same approach that may work, but just takes a much longer time and perhaps is more costly, how can you convince them of different agile approaches that they could adopt to help solve problems and move the project along faster?
Oh, I have a great anecdotal story here. I had a hiring manager who also I looked upon as a mentor years ago. He said, you know, Nitin, I went up to some people and I said, let's try Agile. And they shut me down. They said, no, you know, we're a multi-billion-dollar risk-averse company. We don't do that. So I said, okay. I went back about a year later. I said, how about Scrum? It's one of the flavors under agility. And hey, I got these white papers and other companies are doing this. They're like, no, we're a multi-billion-dollar risk-averse company still, so we're not going to do that. So he went back a third time and he said, hey, do you want to try iterative development? And they're like, what's that? And he said, well, I kind of show you something every 2 to 4 weeks instead of waiting for 6 months. He's like, yeah, we like the sound of that. And it's the messaging, and he had them hooked. And with that, he weaved in the value and he brought it out. Sometimes it's the lingo that turns people off. It could be intimidating. It could be like, yeah, heard that, done that, or yeah, tried it. But they may have also seen poor implementations, or they haven't seen the true value. And I would say you have to chip away slowly. Every organization is evolving. Even those who are adopting and transforming, it's a journey. So I would work in sneaky ways if you need to, because again, there are three models described: top down, bottom up, and stealth. Stealth is what Google did. They were trying and they were introducing these few things, but they didn't give them technical names. They didn't say they were doing Scrum, and then they did it. And then they invited someone, say, hey, there's this guy called Ken Schwaber, you know, let's get him in and let's hear. And this is actually something on YouTube you can find, right? So every once in a while, you have to be that dark ninja in the shadows that emerges. And without even people realizing, they say, oh, wait a minute, what is that we're doing? Just a daily huddle for 10, 15 minutes? Oh, okay, yeah. So you got to be a little sneaky once in a while. I don't know. That's what I think.
I love that. Thank you. Excellent answer.
It's sort of like with children, you got to sneak in the vegetables into the mashed potatoes to get them to eat it, I guess.
I love that. That was
All
awesome.
right.
Very cool.
I could
Thank
share a
you.
story a few jobs back where I had a mainframe backend team that they were definitely waterfall, and they were, we were trying to move them to agile, and they were very hesitant. They just didn't want to do it, and it took it took a number of meetings and it took a number of tries to finally get them to open up. And the ultimate reason was they were worried that if they volunteered for something and they didn't complete it at the end of the sprint, that their performance would be degraded and they'd be punished. Because up until now, up until when we were doing that, they were basically being driven by a manager saying, you do this by this date or else. And so they didn't want to volunteer. And so what I did is I had a conversation with the product owner. I said, hey, we just need to make it clear that if a team volunteers for something, they don't deliver it, we're not going to, blame them. And, I'm not saying that you should encourage them to miss their deliverables, but you have to kind of open it up so that it's safe. You need a safe environment, and you want to make it so that if they don't deliver it, no one's going to get punished. It could become a learning thing. But those are things that you can do. But the key is that you have to get the team talking to figure out why. Why don't, what's stopping them from doing it? And a lot of times people will just say, I don't want to do this because it's new or something like that. But you have to just keep on trying different ways to get them to open up.
No, I absolutely agree with that. Another thing is some people are afraid to fail. So they won't take risk because it doesn't always guarantee success.
I think you're getting into some unresolved childhood trauma. And you know what? You're right. There are people out there.
I know where in the company I work for, there's a lot of finger pointing. I mean, I'm dealing with it as we speak. And if something doesn't go quite so, not only what happened, but who did it? And then the fingers start going that, and I think that really limits a lot of people's potential and their ability to step out of their comfort zone and try new things. Is that fear of being blamed or just not succeeding?
It's a toxic environment and it's unhealthy. And whatever the environment is, it's going to become the culture. This is where, if there is an opportunity, my suggestion would be a Scrum Master facilitate team norms and agreements and have some open-ended questions, such as, what happens when? Right? So what happens when, and you know the scenarios when something doesn't go as well or such and such happens. And then ask the broader questions. How does this team or group want to celebrate? How do we want to mourn? How do we want to take criticism? Are we open to that? And it gets very insightful if there is truly a safe environment, and you can do safety checks as well, to bring that out front, and you're just reflecting where this team is in their journey. That's the first thing. And let people understand what is toxic and unhealthy and what might be the opposite of that. So there's some baby steps there that have to be taken. And again, depending on the culture, the environment, the number of people, that may or may not be easy. It could still be an uphill battle just to get to that stage.
Bob, do you have a comment on that?
Nitin was perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
I
So,
do have something to add to that. I'm sorry for interjecting.
no, go ahead. That's what it's for.
Thank you so much, Ro, for sharing that, because I've experienced that in organizations too, where there's a risk averse and there's really averseness, if that's a word, to learning. And I think sometimes our companies tend to take learning and development for granted. Failure can be a learning experience. And I had a leader who was really influential in my career, and she helped me learn that the word fail, FAIL, is an acronym for first attempt in learning. And so fostering a continuous learning environment where it's okay to make a mistake. We know that they can be costly. We know sometimes they can be detrimental, but learning from them and improving on them is really what helps a company to be more resilient. And so I'm right there with you when I've experienced, the fact that something fails and all of a sudden they think the whole world is on fire when it probably truly isn't. It's really just a time for us to learn and grow from something. So thanks for sharing that. It kind of struck a nerve, brought back some traumatic experiences.
And
fail fast. That's another one too. Absolutely. When you do fail fast, learn, grow, pick it up, and keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, when you're working with Agile, you have a natural transformation. You have to work with the high level executives as well as the teams. The executives need to understand that, so that way, the minute something goes wrong, they're not all over everybody. Because then, basically, anything you did with your teams is dead. Because if the executives come down and squash it, so it's so important that they get that messaging right, and you need that support. It's hard. That's why they need us. That's why everybody on the call. That's why they need you, because they can't do it themselves. They need people that know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean,
I got some nice results on just doing a Google search on the FAIL acronym. I got a few of them that are interesting. First action in learning. Forget about it, loser. First attempt in learning. Forever acquiring important lessons. Oh my.
Wow.
So it depends which end of the spectrum you're in. Do you want to be more in the positive, or you want to be more in the toxic?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things is that that people sometimes don't think about is that Agile is while it's definitely a skill set, it's also a mindset, and some of that mindset is the important ones are in terms of trust, right, and transparency and things like that, and people have to be able to trust not only their fellow team members, but also management, right? So that they don't get that there won't be retribution if they try but they failed. So those are key things. One last thing I just want to mention that
we have less than a minute. We have to end on time. John.
One last thing is, and not so much a question though, but Alpesh Shah did ask if you can just mention the name of the book again and put the title and the author in the chat group.
I'll put it in. This is the book Leading Teams by Richard Hackman.
Okay.
And I don't get any royalties, for this, but I just like to point out what I think is really good. It's crisp.